Hi, everyone. I would like to start by acknowledging and paying respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which we are speaking tonight, the Whadjuk people of Noongar Boodja, the Yawuru people, and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I recognize their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. I pay my respects to the elders of the community and extend my recognition to their ancestors who have passed and all First Nations people who are watching today. I acknowledge that I am on stolen land and Aboriginal sovereignty has not been ceded. My name is Jenna Nolan, and I am the Western Australian State Director for Out for Australia. Out for Australia is a national, completely volunteer-run organization that seeks to support and mentor aspiring LGBTQIA+ professionals. OFA's vision is to create an Australia where every aspiring LGBTQIA+ professional is confident to be their authentic self in workplaces that celebrate diversity and are inclusive. Our mission is to provide visible mentors, role models, leadership, and targeted support to aspiring queer professionals and to strengthen the sense of community among professionals and students. This evening, the panel will be discussing the value of visibility for LGBTQIA+ women in the workplace, followed by a Q&A. You can leave a question on the Zoom Q&A, the Zoom chat, or the Facebook Live comment section. JC, one of OFA's volunteers, will be copying all of your questions into one spot for us, so you may see him in the various comment section leaving you notes. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Amelia MJ Hawcroft, pronouns she, her, hers. Ms. Hawcroft is the LGBTQIA+ subject matter specialist at APM Communities, a youth advisory council member at Origin, and the communications officer at Youth Pride Network. Her work ranges from sexual health live streams to being a D&D dungeon master for young LGBTIQA+ people. At work, MJ's passion lies in upskilling APM staff to provide LGBTQIA+ sensitive services and safe spaces. She claims to be so out that she doesn't own a closet and credits her healthy dose of cynicism to studying politics and international relations as well as history at university. Thank you, MJ. Narelda Jacobs, pronouns she, her, hers. Ms. Jacobs has been a journalist at Network 10 since 2000. Spending 19 years in the Perth newsroom before heading to Studio 10 in Sydney. She began her career at 10 as a reporter and became presenter of 10 News First Perth in 2008. In January 2020, she joined the panel of Studio 10. She has shared the stage with prime ministers, international leaders, and humanitarian advocates. She's passionate about promoting equality and inclusion and has supported charities and organizations like the Motor Neuron Disease Association WA, the WA Aboriginal Leadership Institute, Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras, the Pinnacle Foundation, the Disability Services Commission, and Breast Cancer Care WA. Thank you, Narelda.
Thanks, Jenna.
Lokbadia, pronouns she, her, hers. Lokbadia is a proud Mirrawong Gudgerong woman from Kununurra, Western Australia. She is currently working and studying in Burlew. She is studying psychology and working as the First Nations representative at the Curtin University Student Guild. Lokbadia aspires to complete her degree and return to country to offer culturally secure LGBTQIA+ friendly mental health services. She identifies as a gay woman and is passionate about elevating the voices of her community, as well as promoting mental health awareness and advocating for First Nations sovereignty. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are severely underrepresented in the queer community and can often face discrimination. Lokbadia is an advocate for making safe spaces for people of color in the LGBTIQA+ community and elevating their voices so that we may work towards more inclusivity and representation. Thank you for being here. Georgie McClanachan, pronouns she, her, hers. Ms. McClanachan is a Queensland-raised economist who moved to Perth for love, not money. She has spent the past 6 years working in the commercial team at Woodside, where she currently tackles decarbonization problems across the commercial team at Woodside, where she tackles decarbonization problems across the new energy, technology, and carbon offset teams. In 2016, after starting her career recloseted, she launched Woodside's LGBTI+ network, Spectrum, and was proud to accept the award for Best New Employee Network at the 2019 Australian LGBTI+ Awards. She is passionate about female voices in corporate queer networks and in LGBTI+ young people having equality of choice in their career path. She believes that the economic and environmental challenges of our time need the full, unfettered talent, creativity, and passion of LGBTI+ people. So you're all incredibly accomplished and obviously incredibly busy. So thank you for being here. Now, according to the ACON and PricewaterhouseCoopers study from 2018, Where Are All the Women? LGBTI plus women are 12% less likely to be out at work than men and make up 1/3 of identifying LGBTI plus people at PwC Australia. So you're all working in really different fields and are all out at work. I'm guessing that you would have had very different experiences coming out in the workplace. I think it would be great if each of you could kind of start by giving a rundown of why you decided to come out and how you ended up coming out at work. So look, Badia, I know you're still studying, but did you have any reservations about coming out? Was it just a matter of coming out online for work in uni, or was there a bit more to it?
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. When I first came out at work, it was super casual. I was working in another role, but still at Curtin University. And we were just having lunch and talking about Tinder dates that people had been on. And so then I just talked about something to do with my partner at the time, and I used female pronouns. So that was just a very subtle way of coming out and letting my coworkers know. And they were super casual about it, which I think is the way to react all the time. Having other queer people who were in my team was good as well, because it was something that we could connect on and shared interests that we had between us. But after that, it was pretty casual. Like, I guess my queerness is just a part of my identity and who I am, and I like to feel like I can be myself in whatever workplace I'm in. So it was nice to be able to just share that with my coworkers and it just be normal.
That is wonderful to hear. MJ, from what I understand of your role, being your fantastic queer self is actually part of your job. Did you have any form of workplace coming out? And if so, what was that like?
Honestly, no, because like you mentioned, I pretty much literally got hired to be queer. So they contacted me and said, hey, look, we've got a role for this sort of space going. And so other people in the company knew that this role would be filled. So basically when I stepped into it, I guess there was this assumption that I would be part of community, because it's really important to have community members in those representative roles. So I never really had to come out so much. It was just, as long as people knew that I was in a certain role, they know that I was part of community. And there's been no backlash in that space. So it's always been very sort of casual. And I guess I'm sort of taken as the resident expert on those things as a result. So rather than assuming that I just, you know, I might have some idea that like, okay, let's get the resident gay in on this. Not that I'm the only.
Well, that's a good role to be in then. Georgie, how about you? Why did you decide to reemerge from the closet, and how did you go about it?
Yeah, I guess the story starts about how I ended up back in the closet after being in a super liberal place at uni. And like so many, unfortunately, millennials end up going back into the closet in their first job. And it actually started before I'd even stepped foot into the Woodside building or even arrived in Perth. I was looking at my contract, organising relocation, and there was a box to tick that said, do you have a partner to organise relocation for? And I just sat staring at that box thinking, I don't know if I'm allowed to tick it. You know, I wasn't educated enough to know that the anti-discrimination amendments had been made the year before and what rights I had. And when I started in the workplace, I was, you know, looking around for signs and didn't see any. And so in that moment when you're standing on the precipice, not really knowing what the rules are or what the environment is, you know, need it to have the moment of courage at the very right moment. But it was an interesting experience of moving to a new city and not knowing anybody, but feeling like the most amount of loneliness, not, you know, having to make new friends or sitting in Hyde Park every weekend reading a book. The greatest sense of loneliness was being surrounded by colleagues during the weekdays. And that's a really profound loneliness, to feel that around other people. And so that wasn't an experience after 6 months that I wanted to continue to have. And so, move to a new city, you're desperate for friends, you spend all your time at work, something's got to give. And I was fortunate enough that I moved teams, and the first time I met them all was actually, we were going out to celebrate somebody's leaving, and we were going to karaoke. And I thought, these people are going to hear me sing. And after that, everything else was kind of small fry. I was like, if they can accept my tone deafness, they can accept this. And so like the others on the panel, it was kind of casual. I just started using the correct pronouns and being authentic. And that was that. But like many people, the act of coming out is never really over. It's interaction by interaction. And so, you play a bit of the workplace hokey pokey, coming in and out of the closet and dancing all about. But I was actually quite fortunate, I guess, in some ways, that I accidentally came out in a recorded panel session to our 3,000 staff by virtue of the fact that I was responsible for organising the panel session. And we were to have a gay man, a lesbian woman, and 2 straight male executives on the panel. And our female, Christine Forster, actually had to travel plans changed and she had to pull out last minute. And I was staring down the barrel of an absolute flop of a session where we had more straight voices, all male voices. And I shook the gay phone tree and no women fell out. And I just thought, if not me, then who? And so I, solved my own problem, put myself on that panel, didn't really think about the consequence of coming out to all these people, but it's really saved me a lot of conversations after that. So for that, I'm pretty grateful.
So efficient in the end.
Very efficient.
Narelda, my guess is that your coming out story might be a little bit more complex, just both because of when you came out and then the nature of having to come out to both colleagues and the general public. Will you tell us a bit about why you decided to come out and also how you went about it?
Well, I started at Channel 10 in the year 2000, and I had not long before that come out myself. I started at Channel 10 as a 23, 24-year-old, and I came out to the world as a 19, 20-year-old. And so it was a few years. And so my family was still coming to terms with it. I was still plucking up the courage actually to come out to my family, to be honest. That didn't happen. I didn't actually come out to my family till I was about 23, and then not long after that, then I got my job at Channel 10. So I was kind of, as a freshly what would you call it? Minted gay. I was just like out and proud. I was like going out to the court, going out to Connie's, as you do. And so I was very much out as a person. Then when I got the job at Channel 10, then I was just my authentic self. I was a reporter. So it wasn't until 2008 when I got the presenter's job, then things started to change. And so the public then needed to know who you were as a person. And the Sunday Times magazine, STM, approached my work to do a feature story on me as a new presenter of Perth News for Channel 10. And so the angle would be, well, who is Narelda, and well, she's a lesbian with a partner, and she's got a daughter, and they needed to know that, who I was, if it was a genuine feature, an authentic feature. So I actually went to the highest echelons of Channel 10, the CEO over East, and they decided, yeah, let's do it, and that was 2008. And the effects of doing that, I spoke so honestly about all of my life leading up to that point, and the effect was pretty overwhelming. The impact was overwhelming from other people, not so much from my own family though, because they were still coming to terms with it. My dad was a Reverend of the Uniting Church. My mum was also a pastor. So they, it was way more difficult for them than the public to get their head around it. For my mum, it was, she was thinking, oh, no one is going to watch the news everyone's going to turn their back on you. No, you're not going to be popular. No one's going to like you. And it was actually the complete opposite. So it was just this completely freeing experience. And the biggest reason for my work to approve this was that they didn't want there to be a scandal. You know, they didn't want it to be a secret like this, as if it would be a dirty little secret anyway. It wouldn't, but it wasn't something, you know, there weren't a lot of people on mainstream TV that were out, let alone news readers. So it was a pretty big deal back in 2008. And I'm glad I did from the very beginning, because then I could just be my authentic self, and I didn't have to, you know, Georgie, like you said, it kind of, you didn't have to have the conversation with people because everybody already knew.
Yeah, that sounds complex still. And I know that there are very different career paths at play with you all, but it looks like time-wise and things have also gotten easier. So that's definitely something we can hopefully move forward with. So according to that same Where All the Women study, I will post a link to that in the chat and things in a bit. So 1 in 5 queer women have left a workplace before the age of 26 due to a lack of inclusion. The study also found that LGBTI networking events were often social events dominated by gay men. This impacted women's willingness to prioritize these events. The study concluded that including women in the design and delivery of LGBTIQA+ networks will likely make them more beneficial to women. Georgia, you started working at Woodside in 2015 and then started Spectrum in 2016. So a few years before Meg O'Neill came on board as somebody that was kind of out and on top. What made you decide to start Spectrum, and were there any hurdles?
I think I didn't want my experience to be the norm. And you've listed off some great statistics. It's a great report. And I've since learned how many millennials do go back into the closet, because invisibility fails. I mean, there was a policy for invisibility in the military in the US, and thousands upon thousands of servicemen and women were discharged. And so I think the idea that sexuality isn't already in the workplace is a very real myth. I mean, I knew the names of my colleagues' children. I could recognize their partners from photos. I think we just don't really recognize it if it's heterosexual relationships that are out in the workplace. But it got me thinking about my own experience, and is the onus on the new starter who's not familiar with the environment to be their authentic self on day one and be transforming people in that way? Or is the onus really on allies who are coming from a place of comfort and from organizations to out themselves first? And so it was, you know, myself and a handful of other, I can't take all the credit, handful of other like-minded people through which Spectrum was born, really to elevate and turn up the volume on allies and make them really, really visible, so that it enabled LGBT people to be visible as well by inviting and welcoming that. In terms of hurdles, oh my goodness, I mean, so many. And if anybody who's listening in is this way inclined, I mean, we could talk all night about community networks and the challenges and the failures that I myself made. And so, yeah, I welcome anyone reaching out if you're that way inclined and would like to do something in your own organization. But I guess the two major hurdles, one is, of course, organizational change. Policies is really easy, but you don't want to welcome people to come out in an environment that's not safe. And unfortunately, it is a bit of a chicken and the egg. I mean, people come out and it transforms our lives. I mean, I'm sure everybody here has transformed their families' lives. I know my mom is listening in. I hope that I have transformed hers and her friends' ideas. But you need to make sure that you're protecting LGBT people from backlash. And this was in the lead up to marriage equality. And so there were, you know, some really hurtful debates that were going on, in part because, you know, Spectrum gave an opportunity for those conversations to happen. someone in my organization, the head of my function, someone who decides promotions and roles and performance, did tell me that they were really uncomfortable about the gay thing and that they didn't want it to be a platform for political influence. And that disparity in power from a second-year grad to the head of the area was really intimidating, I think. And so that's a hard thing, is trying to change people and trying to welcome people to come out in an organization that may not be ready. And probably the second biggest hurdle was just, self-imposed. As a population of one, you do feel like you need to be the antithesis of every negative gay female stereotype. And so, yeah, that was interesting. And I think also LGBT people really struggle with, or do experience, feelings of needing to be perfect and perfectionism. And I think, the idea that, if I do enough things, then maybe that will eclipse this like big gay mark on my record. And so, I really exhausted myself trying to be the person that I thought the community deserved as a second-year graduate in a new organization. I was taking myself to public speaking courses, storytelling classes, all sorts of things to try to be the accidental advocate that I had somehow found myself in.
Well, you won the Best New Employee Network of 2019, so it obviously worked, so well done with that. So according to that same study, very popular, it found that role models were critical to making LGBTIQA plus women confident in the workplace. Out for Australia provides role models through our mentoring program on Mentor Loop, which you can join as a mentor by clicking the coral-colored button on the top right corner. But Nerelda, I know that you have worked with the Pinnacle Foundation and the Western Australian Aboriginal Leadership Institute. Why is mentorship important to you?
Well, it's that old saying, you can't be what you can't see. And this is so relevant in so many ways for, gender, for race, sexuality, all of the things, all of the marginalized groups. Really, if you haven't seen someone that you relate to, then you're probably less likely to forge a path, because forging that path is so hard when you don't have anybody there that you can see, oh, you've done that and you're now thriving and you're a success and you've been welcomed. That whole feeling of being welcomed and having that sense of belonging is so important. And for me at Channel 10, there was no one really within the network that I could look towards. But Georgia, you was talking about the marriage equality debate, and that really was the turning point for me, because I really wanted to speak out and campaign for the Yes, for the Yes campaign. But as a journo, we're not allowed to protest and we're not allowed to speak publicly. It's changed now though, with social media being so, Twitter being so, people being so, open on Twitter, and it's all opinion now. But when at the height of the marriage equality debate, we, as journos and news presenters, we weren't allowed to be political at all. So I was always stopped from commenting publicly. So I asked, can I still be a part of the Yes campaign? And it got flatly denied. And then came a turning point. The CEO of the entire company sent an email out to all staff saying, as a network, we support marriage equality. So that was from the big boss, And so I said to my manager then, does this change anything? And actually it did. And I was able to then speak publicly about marriage equality. So that was a huge turning point. And that the mentor in that case was an ally, was the CEO of the entire company. And, leadership is so important from the top. And we have that leadership all around us with our influence and be able to use our influence all around us. We're all leaders in that respect.
Well, thank you very much. So moving on from kind of specific mentoring to kind of more just plain visibility, Badia, was there somebody that you looked to when you were coming out, somebody that kind of inspired you, a person or organization or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Kununurra, which is a very small town up in the East Kimberley region. It's actually got a population of 6,000. And when it comes to queer populations, probably like 4, including myself. And so when I had my first girlfriend and when I first came out, I was 16. And my sister, who was bisexual, she had come out before me, I think back, I would have been around 10 or 11, and she had a girlfriend. So she had come out to the whole family and they accepted her. I think she had a much harder path than I did, because by the point where I had come out, all the family were they had learned how to navigate and what it was like having a queer person in the family and how to support them and be more understanding. So I actually told her first, and I got her to tell my mum for me because I was a bit ashamed to do that. But it was so helpful, and I honestly think that it has really shaped who I am and how I am as a person today. Like, I feel so very strong and proud in my queer identity, and it just, it feels just so natural to me. But had I have not had that representation from a young age of someone within my own community and my own family, I think it would have been so much more difficult to just come out in general. And I think just queer representation as a whole is so important, because had I have seen queer representation even in the media before my sister, then maybe I would have connected the dots a little sooner and realized, like, oh yes, this is possible. You can be a woman who loves other women. And, I think that the LGBTQI plus community has come a really long way, even just listening to everyone else's experiences in their workplace, because luckily for me, I've come into company cultures that have been super supportive and inclusive. But when you're, a Black person in the queer community, there's, we still have a long way to go in terms of Indigenous representation there. And you can still face discrimination and racism from, other people in the queer community. So yeah, it's great to see so many people being vocal and just taking up space. We have a long way to go, but we will get there.
MJ, is there anybody that you kind of have looked up to as well?
To clarify, is this going to be during my coming out process or in the workplace?
Whenever.
So honestly, though the others said that things do get better, and they absolutely, I'm 24, things are going to have been much easier for me coming out. But when I came out initially as trans, that was the first thing I worked out. There was nothing. I think I'd seen 2 news articles from age 13 to age 17, in that period, that mentioned trans women, and they were filled with slurs and stuff. And other than that, the only representation was, quite frankly, pornography. So for me, it was, as Nerolda was saying, you can't be what you can't see. So it was, well, what am I? Because I clearly don't exist. So when I came out, it was very much by myself, but I did have the benefits of the people who've come before me, in the sense that they have allowed, psychiatrists who will support trans people to work in that space and advertise that fact. I'm immensely privileged in that. So I won't be able to put any names to anyone in my initial coming out journey, but the people, the nameless, the faceless people who have built that groundwork are the ones that I really owe that to. And in the workplace, it's been fairly simple. Literally my first week, I got invited along to the Pride WA luncheon because our company was building a Pride group. And yeah, basically I walked in and the general manager's like, hello, I am also queer. Would you like to come to this? So it was a really simple journey for me, and I'm immensely privileged for that.
Okay, and Georgie, who were your queeros?
As you mentioned, now we have Meg on top. But I think that is also demonstrates, I think, the power of having an environment that is inviting. This is someone who had spent 25 years in the oil and gas industry and was able to be out at work for the first time in a place that had a network. So I think you need different people at different points in time. I think when, I was 13 or coming out to myself, I definitely needed celebrities. I needed to see the stories that I wanted to play out in my own life on TV. I needed to hear Ellen Page's lying by omission speech. But I think in the workplace, I really do look to allies, and I look to, those overt cues that this is a safe place, this is welcome. So, subtleties in language, the lack of subtlety on wear it purple day so that you know that they're wearing purple intentionally. It's not just, an accident of their closet. I think those things are really powerful. And so in the workplace, I definitely look to allyship.
And Nerelda, was there anybody that you looked to as well?
I looked to the politicians. We had the Greens politician, Giz Watson, who was so vocal, and I just looked up to her. And in fact, when I was at WAPA studying to become a journo, I did some assignments on her, and then when I was a journo at Channel 10, I pitched stories so I could interview her because I loved her so much. And I think, and that sort of continues. All the queer politicians are just, they cop it. Politicians cop it anyway, but to be queer, Louise Pratt has done an amazing job, and a lot of them do work behind the scenes without you even knowing it to get things like marriage equality and to fight the religious, discrimination bills and that all that sort of stuff. And they do it behind the scenes for no recognition at all, and yet they're still copying the hate. So there were so many people, and then on an international level, like Martina Navratilova, like the tennis players, and Melissa Etheridge. I was honoured to be able to meet Sam Smith at Mardi Gras this year, and they've done an incredible job in opening the minds of the world. So there's so many people, and I'll get off this call and just be like, oh, why didn't I mention them and them and them? So there's just so many.
Okay, so a whole bunch of very inspirational people that kind of came before us, those that inspire the inspirational themselves here. So I know that we have some allies watching tonight. Welcome. I just want to do a quick definition for them. Intersectionality is a term that was coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. Intersectionality refers to the way in which various forms of inequality operate together and often exacerbate each other. The intersectionality of racism, sexism, classism, and ableism experienced by a person is not the sum of its parts. It's multiplicative, not additive, and all inequality is not created equally. This panel carries with it so many identities: woman, Aboriginal, remote upbringing, gay, queer, trans, sexually fluid, homoromantic, asexual, aromantic. You're all very multifaceted, like diamonds, strong and brilliant. So I'm just gonna open this up to the panel. Do you have any reflections on the multiple barriers of the glass ceiling and the glass closet, plus the other glass boxes that you've been put into due to your multiple historically marginalized identities? Who wants to go first? Thanks.
I can go. Cool. Great question. And absolutely, like, I can tell you that my queer identity and my cultural identity are two really huge fundamental parts of just me as a whole and who I am as a person. And up until recently, I didn't know how to celebrate the two of them together. And I went to a conference in Sydney last year, and we had like the conference ball, which was Mardi Gras themed. And I got to celebrate with, so many other people who were there, who were Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, who were there for the same reasons like that I was, who were like-minded. And it was a really healing experience. I think you know, making room for both of those two identities to exist at the same time and celebrating them is very important. I think that when it comes to the workplace, one of the things that's difficult to identify is the reason behind, you know, is the organization truly committed to this, or is it performative? I know, like, being an Indigenous person who's worked in 50D positions, which are positions for people who identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, it's not as simple as just hiring someone from that demographic. Like, you have to look at the structure of the company culture. Is it really a safe space for these people? You know, I still have to go into work and code switch every day and speak a lot more formally than I might. So it's really looking at all of those things and seeing what the intentions of the organisation is and how committed they are to valuing diversity in that space.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to say about intersectionality?
I can go. I'm trying to still formulate what I'm going to say, but I hope it comes out in a roundabout way. But when you grow up with your mind wide open to discrimination and how people are treated, and you see people, members of my Aboriginal community in Perth and all around the country, changing the way they move through the world to conform, so they're not discriminated against. And now we're seeing a shift where that difference is being celebrated. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to witness that change, that societal shift that we're going through in Australia at the moment. And I have acutely realised this change in my move to Sydney, which was earlier this year. And I realised that in Perth, I lived in a bubble. Like, everybody, all my family, all my friends, the circles that I moved in, even everybody that I worked with, we were all pretty open-minded, and you could have frank conversations with people, and they might go away and say, you know, sticker and say, oh, well, I didn't agree with anything with what she said, but they don't say it to your face. When I came to Sydney and joined Studio 10 and moved away from the news desk and started sharing my opinions, I realised a lot of Australians don't think the same way as me, which was really tough. It was really tough. And not only do they not think the same, they troll people left, right, and centre. And that was my first real encounter with how bad the trolling is, and how racist and discriminatory Australians can be, and particularly when they're anonymous. The intersections are really interesting. It allows us to relate to many, many different walks of life, and to walk through life with our eyes wide open to the discrimination that marginalised groups experience. And the most we can do is to call it out.
Yeah, I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's just not okay. Oh,
well, I mean, look on Studio 10's Facebook page, because that's like, I did that once, and it wasn't even anything to do, wasn't even a conversation about race. It was just the look of the sight of my face brought the racist out, and it caught me at a weak moment, and I vowed then never to do it again. It was right when BLM, it was right after George Floyd had been murdered, and I was sharing some things on TV about because that the weekend after George Floyd was murdered, don't you remember, everybody around was saying, well, glad we live in Australia. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad we live in Australia. And so we kind of put some facts straight on Studio 10, and it was right after that. It was, and that was, and we all experienced that hate that a lot of us had never felt before. And it just caught me in a weak moment, and I just wanted to see, what are people talking about? you know, this clip's got a lot of views. It was something kind of boring, but it was just the side of my face that people were like, just the hate was so awful. My partner Stevie had left me for a moment, and in that moment I read stuff, and she came back in, and I was bawling my eyes out. And so that moment, then we vowed never to go on Studio 10's Facebook page ever again.
Yeah, still not okay. Yeah.
No, there are people out there, and by calling it out, that's as hard as that can be. That's all we can do.
MJ, do you have anything to add at all?
Oh boy, do I? Yeah, intersectionality is a really important thing to me, and though I can't speak on the intricacies of race and being LGBTQI+, I can speak on the sort of gender experiences, because let's be honest, J.K. Rowling's been very popular lately for all the wrong reasons. And a lot of them relate to sort of my conceptual existence, in that sort of, you know, obviously I'm a trans woman, and there's this internalized fear because of things like what J.K. Rowling has said and others have said, TERFs, and if we want to speak plainly, that I am like a lesser person or a lesser form of woman, and that I'm not super welcome in certain women-based queer spaces or women-based spaces in general. And even if that's not true, because obviously there's a lot of advocacy and a lot of activism where people acknowledge that trans women are women, that there are, you know, subtype of women, like under the women umbrella or the label. Even if there are groups that are that positive and affirm trans women as women, then there's still all that damage done by, you know, this sort of cis sexism and cis normativity that tells you that being cis is the best or the best way to be, and that even if other people don't feel that way, you take that into spaces and feel like, oh, do I really belong in here? And it really compounds in a really frightening sort of way, because you know, being a queer woman's hard enough. And then being trans in that space sort of doubles your sort of, I guess, chances or fears of being called out or attacked. I mean, I know that going to like the bathroom is a terrifying experience. When I once lived in the States, and the first time I used the women's bathroom over there, I was really like terrified, look at no one else, because there's this sort of notion that we're predatory, and it's like, I just want to pee. I just want to, you know, I want to go about my daily work. I want to be able to support people. I don't want to have to deal with being seen as someone else. But even if people aren't saying that, I still end up feeling that. And that's something I've got to work through, obviously, but it's societal and it's ingrained, and we all have a role in calling that out, as the others have said.
That's hard again. I think the biggest thing that, you know, the turfiness that you have to put up with, and kind of not feeling safe in your own community, whether it's due to race or gender or anything. It's just, as a marginalized community, you think that queer people would be understanding, and the fact that your own community isn't necessarily safe is just, I'm sorry. So along the similar vein of intersectionality and things, how can you ensure that a workplace or whatever is diverse and inclusive while avoiding tokenism? I know you kind of touched on this before a little bit, Claudia, but how?
This is definitely something that I am still trying to work through. So I guess, yeah, it does depend, because people do hire people, you know, hire someone from a particular community, but it's that's not enough. It's more to really just work on the organization and the structure of the company. It's something that I'm still trying to work through in my own career. I currently work with the Curtin Student Guild, and it's a very inclusive and liberal environment. So they're very big on elevating the First Nations voices and all of this sort of stuff in the organisation, which is great. It's definitely what you want. And my role is quite political, so it definitely fits into the environment there. But yeah, sometimes you can feel like a diversity hire, especially when it comes to different ways of working. I think that workplaces need to account for how other people learn and how people work best and what priorities you might have, like taking a holistic look at the person who's working there and seeing them as a person and not just an employee. I think that, yeah, it was definitely something that I was trying to work through in my last role. I honestly haven't figured out how to get there yet, but I think company culture and just the intentions behind it play a big role.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on that kind of diversity inclusion, but not tokenism?
Channel 10, we had our first Wear It Purple Day for the first time ever on Friday, and it went down so well. And it was a Zoom. Well, most of us were in person in the studio, and there were a couple of other people in other states, but it was shared around the entire network around the country, and it was a huge hit. And again, it was driven from above. It was had endorsement from the CEO, and the CEO sent emails to all staff members asking, for you to register to be involved. So yeah, it's a cultural change, but it needs to be led from above, definitely, for it not to be tokenistic.
And MJ?
Absolutely agreed with Norelda. At APM, we also did our first Wear It Purple thing, and having that support, because I really tried to push it this year. I was like, right, going to be in this role, we're going to make this a priority. And pushing that up to the upper echelons and having them bring that down for all staff was, like Norelda said, immensely powerful in that sort of way that it brings things to people's attention. The workplace is a fantastic place for those sorts of things to get brought out. Obviously not all the time, like with the marriage equality campaign and the issues that came from that. But I'd also like to touch on the fact that there are so many really qualified, really fantastic LGBTQI plus educators from community who can, it'll usually be fee for service, but sometimes they're listed as free and it's like paid for by external stakeholders, but training for your staff, training for environments, going through, even having a look at the rainbow tick accreditation and going, okay, how bad off are we in this particular case? Because not everyone's going to be like our organization, where I deliver that training, where we have a pride group that, reviews our progress and stuff. Not everywhere's going to be that that advanced, whereas other places are going to need that support. And it's really important to know that there's support out there that you can fund and support in that way while your staff are supported, and support community by doing that.
So kind of top-down leadership is key for a lot of this then. So have any of you ever felt like your physical appearance at work has been policed or moderated, whether it's by yourself or by other people in the workplace? Have they ever kind of made you feel like you're too mask or too femme?
Every time I'd come back from holidays, my hair would be shorter. And so the boss did have to take me aside one day and said, look, it's a bit too short. but when I would go on holiday, so if I was on holiday for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I'd think, I could probably grow out by then. And so the first afternoon that I had off, I'd go to the hairdresser and just go a little bit shorter, and so that's it. That's all. That's for me.
Anybody else? Did you feel like you had to kind of justify yourself at all?
Definitely when I was first starting out in my career, I thought that professional was synonymous with a sort of corporate femme look. And so now I do have a lot of pencil skirts and things that, you know, don't suit me. You can't see on Zoom, but I like a loud pant, and I favor a flatter shoe. So now there's a section of my closet that's a bit wasted, unless my girlfriend runs out of clothes. And I know that some professional services companies did only recently get rid of policies that did indoctrinate, you know, that corporate femme look. But I think, you know, there are benefits to working in an engineering company. Engineers don't tend to have the best track record with fashion sense. So I think that has been quite liberating for myself personally. And also feeling like you need to be visible is also very liberating. Sometimes I worry that I don't look queer enough in the workplace. And so, you know, I go and get some big rainbow earrings so that nobody is confused. Someone once asked, is Georgie a lesbian? And someone responded, no, I think she's just from Melbourne. At the time, I was rocking an asymmetrical haircut. I was trying to make ear bangs happen, and which hasn't caught on. And yeah, it turns out you try to look queerer, and people just mistake you from living in a trendier city.
I can confirm that. I mean, as a quite like high femme lesbian, you can see that I've got a bleached fringe to try and like be edgy and visibly queer. But and it's, you know, it's actually probably a privilege within itself, because when people see me, they don't generally presume that I am queer. And I guess that's just because of all the stereotypes that they have around queer women, and, you know, how we're supposed to present ourselves and typically be more masculine and all that sort of stuff. But I haven't had any experiences in that vein, because, yeah, I am generally appearing more straight passing, I guess.
MJ?
Yeah, I mean, tucking is a really concerning practice in the implication that you might have to do it in a workplace. So if you're a trans person and you've got junk, there's this really big onus or implicit onus that you have to sort of tuck it away and hide it. And female coded clothing is generally not very accepting of that. So if you're wearing anything that you know, a bulge or a tuck could come undone in, you have to think very, very carefully about whether you're going to wear that. So definitely in my case, what I wear to work is very limited in comparison, because I'm like, oh gosh, if I, you know, wear this, I don't want people staring at me. I don't want people looking at me just because I don't fit these normative stereotypes of what I should look like in a certain piece of clothing. And it's also for comfort. Like if you force yourself into clothes that don't work for you, it can hurt and it can have health consequences. So it's really, really important to be able to be confident and be comfortable. And I think companies definitely need to keep that in mind. Luckily, we've got a relatively good, like, chill dress sense or dress code, but it's just really important for companies to keep that in mind, to make sure that, you know, employees' health doesn't come at that risk, whether that's mental or physical health.
Thank you. So the Q&A has been open. I've answered a couple as we've gone along, but there are a couple that people wanted to put out as well. So this is, as an ally, I sometimes worry about taking space or voice from LGBTQIA+ people at work. Do you have any tips for showing support at work without overstepping? Anyone?
This is a good one, because I think one of the most important things to do as an ally is to just simply listen. Listen to the people from within that community. But it's also really valuable to have allies in situations where, you know, someone might say something that's homophobic or racist and just downright hurtful. As a person within that community, you have to first compose yourself and compose your emotions in order to respond to a comment like that. So I think that that's a really important time when allies do come in, is if a person is uncomfortable and they can take that emotional labor from the person within the community. But it's always just determining what the people in community need, consulting with them, and just listening, understanding that as someone without those intersections, you will never really be able to understand from a personal, because you don't have the personal experience, but listening is just super important.
I also think it's really important for allies to set the language and the tone of conversation. So, you know, by coming in on a Monday, say, how was your partner? You know, what did you and your girlfriend do, or what did you and your husband do? You know, and also having allies, for me to hear an ally say, what pronouns do you prefer? Like that's incredible. You know, that's mind blowing, really, you know, to get that. And so I think it's setting the language that everybody should be living by.
I think, yeah, those two answers have really nailed it. And I think you can't underestimate, and I think it's a great question, because you can't underestimate when LGBT people are in the workplace. They're so conscious of cues. And so, I mean, the smallest clue they're definitely going to pick up on. So if it's a little rainbow sticker, if it's rainbow colored laces, find something that's a signal. And if you're not comfortable asking questions yet, then simply doing that is enough to invite somebody to start a conversation. And then definitely be very conscious of your language. Silence speaks volumes. Asking genuine questions when they come from a place of genuine interest, I think, yeah, is not going to offend somebody. So being open to learning and absolutely stepping in. Advocating for yourself is sometimes really hard and really exhausting, and the onus often falls on the community to educate allies. And so, yeah, I cheer for any ally who wants to educate other allies and yeah, share the message.
Okay, we have another one. I'm going to, I think what they're asking is, coming out in the workplace, is it something where, have you found that it's actually a big deal, or is it more just something that you make a big deal out of in your mind? Is it like I think that's what they're trying to ask here is, was it really a big deal, or is it something that kind of a mountain out of molehill situation?
Yeah, it's as big as and uncomfortable as you want to make it, I guess. And we probably work ourselves up to a point of thinking, you know, like what my mum thought initially, like, no, you know, everyone's going to turn on you, no one's going to like you, no one's going to watch. You shoot yourself in the foot, you know, don't do it. But it's not like that at all. And you know, I'm talking about 2008. You know, in today's modern society, it's fine. I think people now will work themselves up to thinking it's something that in reality is worse. I mean, it doesn't detract from how monumental it is for you to do it. And, you know, you might also have that kind of discrimination and homophobia that we're talking about, but it will just be so freeing for you, and you can live your, you know, authentic self, be your authentic self, and there's nothing better than that.
I think the other thing is that, just for people that are watching, if you are thinking about coming out and things don't go well, remember that there is support. A whole bunch of different kind of, whether it's going to just somebody else in your workplace or a family, friend, trans folk of WA, there's a whole bunch of different resources. So you can reach out to Out for Australia if you have problems, and we can point you in the right direction of somebody that could help. But it should go okay now, and it should have gone okay 50 years ago. But just because it should, and just because things are changing, it doesn't mean it always is. Thank you, Kai, in the chat, who's posting all kinds of links and resources for people. So that is going to wrap it up right on time. The panelists have done an amazing job highlighting the value of visibility for LGBTIQA+ women in the workplace. It's been said that you can't be what you can't see. And certainly things would have been easier for all of us here if we would have had more representation, if we would have just had other shoes to walk in. By that same token, these 5 amazing women have been, they've forged a path that we can all now walk down. So thank you all for the work that you've been doing. Presence does not denote power, and real systemic change can only happen when leadership is as diverse as the population. So thank you for being leaders. To everybody watching on Zoom, there will be a survey that will pop up somehow when this ends. Please fill that out. And thank you, Sarah and Angela, for interpreting, and to the dozens of OFA volunteers behind the scenes that have made this possible. Our next event is Out for Bisexuality, Busting Common Myths, and that's on September 24th. MJ, Nerelda, Lokbadia, and Georgie, thank you so much for your time tonight. Hope everybody has a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks for making us visible.
Thank you all so much.
Awesome.
Thanks
that
for
was
having
great.
us.
Yeah, you did a great job, Jenna. You're awesome. And everyone on the panel, you're amazing.